Greetings, this is a very strange Aeon. Welcome to my video. So, first things first for Revenant. If you've just picked up the game with no expansions, you will notice you can't play this. Revenant requires the Heart of the Thorn expansions to play, which in turn means that you will always have access to one of its specialties, the Herald. Revenant probably has the most complicated resource management in the game. It has an energy system, which will go up depending on the amount of pips here, or down, depending on what abilities you're using, and will be spent to use various of its abilities. But unlike the Thief, it still has normal cooldowns. On top of that, its energy will also refresh when it changes legend. This together can make it feel very unusual for people used to other classes. You'll notice I mentioned legends. Legends are another special system for Revenant. You can pick multiple different legends, and you get access to more of them depending on your class, which give access to different abilities. Or, well, I say gain access, they force you to use certain abilities. Revenants cannot freely select their utility or elite skills. Instead, each of these are granted depending on which legend you play. This can mean that Revenant can have very complicated gameplay, but building it can be strangely simple, as there's no sort of umming and awing about which utility moves you pick. You just take whatever the legend has. Offside all of the mechanical complexity, Revenant does tend to fight more like a traditional fightery style character, being relatively tough but also relatively aggressive, but not having too much in the way of utility options. Herald. Herald is a buff-orientated character at its core. You gain access to Glint as a new legend, and you probably have the single easiest time buffing out of any character. Herald is built around raising auras, which decrease your energy regen, but in turn just constantly spam out buffs to everyone in a large area. There are plenty of jokes about how Heralds can be AFK and still keep complete buff uptime on their entire party. They can generally be built either in a more offensive manner or in a more healing manner, though they will always be buff and group orientated. Herald grants access to the shield. Like most shields, this provides various defensive bonuses and very little in the way of offense. Vindicator. Ribbit? Ribbit? Ribbit. Ribbit, ribbit, ribbit. Okay, enough joking. Vindicators look like frogs when they play because they have their special dodge mechanic. They leap up into the sky and then leap down for a big attack, which can either do damage or healing depending on their setup. This can frankly start looking ludicrous as they start doing it a ton in combat, but is actually a really powerful and useful tool. They can generally build either as a supporting healing based character or in a more offensive aggressive based character. The legend they gain access to has two modes, one of which is basically pure offense and one of which is basically pure healing and defense. While you will tend to be building around one or the other, you can still swap between them, and a large amount of skill expression can know when to use the one you wouldn't otherwise be using. Vindicator as a whole tends to be a very versatile, powerful, and generally melee-oriented character. Gains access to the Greatsword, a generally rather solid melee option. Renegade. Some of my more observant listeners may have noticed that I didn't do this in the conventional order, and that is because Renegade, like say the Chronomancer, is in a bit of a weird place at the moment. I will be honest, Renegade of every specialization was the one I had the longest time trying to work out how to describe its summary. At the core of this is because, since Secret of Obscure, its weapon has been able to be stolen. It has lost a bit of its identity. Previously, it tended to be defined as being the ranged-orientated Revenant. The Revenant not having great access to ranged weapons, short bow that Renegade granted access to was a very reliable option. Looks at other abilities that lean towards ranged and area denial, generally making it play a bit like the Dragon Hunter or certain builds of Ranger. Now that those weapons can be taken by the other builds, this identity seems to be far less clear. Do not take this as indication that Renegade is weak. In my experience, plenty of good Renegades will completely hand me my arse. It still has access to a good deal of buffing and a decent amount of area attacks, while still retaining relatively high damage. That said, I still feel that it is sort of starting to lack in flavor or clear identity. Hopefully this will not be the case in the future, as alterations come in and Renegade may be granted a bit more of a clearer identity. For now, Renegade is a solid character, but it's hard to sort of give it a clear archetype that I can point to and go, do you like this style of play? Therefore play it. It buffs, it does damage, but so do most classes. Well, that's it for Revenant. How about you go out there and try and make your own legend?